Morning, Glory America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. On Friday afternoon, I sat down with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in his offices on the 7th floor of the State Department. Almost exactly a year since I interviewed him at CIA headquarters in Langley. Here's part one of the interview. Secretary Pompeo, thank you for having us.
Hugh, it's great to be with you.
Let me start
Welcome
practical.
to the State Department.
Great to be here. Let me be practical. You've got some empty offices at the Department of State. Is the Senate working with you to fill them so you can have the leadership in place for the best diplomatic corps in the world?
So the answer is we need to move faster here. Everyone in the process needs to. We've got to get our diplomats out to every corner of the world and do that as expeditiously as possible. It is the case when I took over. There were some big gaps in important places. We'll soon have our ambassador in place in South Korea and some of the places that are absolutely most essential. But we need everyone helping, and I'm confident that Senators Menendez and Corker will help me achieve that.
How about the leader? You talked to Leader McConnell about this as well?
Yeah, he's fully on board. He's moving our folks through as quickly as he can. We may get a couple of extra weeks in August where we'll have some opportunity to get some additional people out there doing what the president wants, right? Leading to deliver his foreign policy in every corner of the...
You're a former congressman. You can't envy your Senate colleagues staying here in August, do you?
It'll be warm, but I'll be here right alongside them.
All right.
So will our diplomats.
Let's go geopolitical. 40 years ago, Alexander Solzhenitsyn this month talked about a world split apart in the Soviet Union. 71 years ago, another Army guy, George Marshall, gave the Marshall Plan. Both of them were talking about the Soviet Union. Is it time to reorient to our near peer or peer competitor being Russia or then the Soviet Union to the PRC now? Are they number one in our competitive environment?
I think they do pose the most serious threat and, frankly, an opportunity for America if we can get it right. If you compare and contrast the as between not the Soviet Union but Russia and China, we've got one that has wealth and resources and the other that is a power that is struggling mightily. We need to make sure we understand what China is doing. The president has been very clear about the risk to America associated with their willingness to steal our property, our intellectual property and otherwise. Eyes wide open with respect to Russia's efforts in the South China Sea and around the world to build out a much bigger, stronger, tougher country. There's things we clearly need to do alongside them and where we have shared interests, but where we don't, we need to make sure America's properly positioned to speak to them about each of our two countries' respective roles within the world.
When you sat down with President Xi not long ago, was that cordial? Was it friendly? He gets along so well with President Trump. You're the diplomat, maybe the bad cop to President Trump's good cop. How did it go?
It went great. It was very kind of him to visit with me. It was late one evening. I was returning to the United States, but wanted to make sure and stop in. China will have an important role to play as we work our way through the challenging issue of denuclearizing North Korea. And I wanted to make sure and explain to them the conversations that the president had had with Chairman Kim to make sure they understood what it was we needed from them, which at this point is to continue to make sure that the economic sanctions that are in place remain in place. And then we had a handful of other issues that I wanted to speak with President Xi about. And it was a good, warm, cordial meeting. I think we both expressed our views, and I appreciated him taking time to meet with the Secretary of State from the United States.
When you think of him, he's now president for as long as we can see. You think Mao and Deng, are we talking about 20, 25 years with President Xi? And do the American people fully grasp what a significant player he is now, not just for this year, but for the next decade or two?
Yeah, it's undoubtedly the case. He has consolidated power in the way that his immediate predecessors had not, in a way that's historic. And the United States and other countries in the region as well need to recognize that. I think some are waking up to it in ways that they may not have 2 or 5 years ago. We all need to acknowledge what China presents in terms of both opportunity and challenge.
In 1972, President Nixon sort of flipped the script on the Soviet Union by going to see Mao, even though Mao had been the greater murderer in the 20th century. Is it possible that you and the president are working to flip the script again and perhaps make nice with Russia because China represents to the United States a bigger competitor?
The president's been unambiguous since he took office that there are places where Russia is working against the United States, but many places where we work together. I had a chance to do that in my previous role as CIA director, where we worked with the Russians on counterterrorism issues, where the two nations had shared interests. And so we are having conversations with our Russian counterparts, trying to find places where we have overlapping interests. but protecting American interests where we do not.
Are you going to go to Moscow this summer?
I don't know if I'll be heading to Moscow. I'll meet with my Russian counterpart somewhere, I'm sure. I've spoken to Sergei Lavrov a couple of times already as the Secretary of State. Good conversations, each of us expressing our displeasure with each other for various things, all the while making sure that the things that matter most in America, right? You can't mess around in American elections. Some of the behaviors that they're undertaking in places like Syria and Ukraine are just, they're not helpful, they're not constructive towards the value set that Americans hold dear, and those places will continue to work to make sure they know our interests and our concerns. And then where there's places we can't find common ground, we'll certainly try and do that.
Should we be surprised if President Trump is in Moscow this summer?
I don't know what the president's schedule is going to be. I know Ambassador Bolton's planning to travel to Moscow on Sunday or Monday. He'll be with his counterpart, and I think it's likely that President Trump will be meeting with his counterpart in the not-too-distant future following that meeting.
Interesting. Let me ask about President Xi. What is his role vis-a-vis Chairman and the deal? Does he have a veto over what North Korea is doing with you and in your conversations?
The conversations between the United States and North Korea have been bilateral talks, just the two of us. We are working to strike a deal that Chairman Kim has signed up for, where there will be a bargain, where he will fully denuclearize. He will permit us to verify that complete denuclearization, and in exchange for that, we'll provide security assurances. You know the story well. For decades, the North Korean leadership, Chairman Kim, his father and grandfather alike, believed the nuclear program was their security out. It provided them with regime stability and security. And we've now flipped that narrative. I believe we have convinced him that nuclear program, in fact, presents a threat to him. And that giving up that program is the path towards a brighter future for the North Korean people.
What is he like, Mr. Secretary, when the cameras aren't on and the door is closed? When you first went to Pyongyang, does he have a sense of humor? Does he joke with you?
Yeah, he does have a sense of humor. He's conversant in things Western, so he's paying close attention to what takes place. I'm confident he'll be watching this show. He's watching things that Americans are saying. He's looking to determine if, in fact, America is serious about this. If he does this, if he takes this step and reorients, sets a new strategic direction for North Korea, where they focus on the economy and their people as opposed to their war-making machine. If he makes that strategic change, does he have a reliable partner in America who will behave the way that President Trump committed that we would when they met in Singapore? So he's bright. He knows the file. He knows the topic very, very well. He's not turning to others for guidance. It is Chairman Kim who is clearly articulating what you heard him say when he was in Singapore, that he is prepared to fully denuclearize.
Now, Secretary Pompeo, when you sit down with someone like Chairman Kim or President Xi, you're sitting down with people who have human rights records, which are awful. But FDR sat down with Stalin and Nixon with Mao and President Reagan with Gorbachev. What's in your mind when you're going through with someone who you know the body count is high, but with whom we have to deal?
Yeah, we know the histories. This administration has been very clear about defending human rights. Everywhere we go, we talk about it. When we meet with countries that aren't complying with human rights in the way we would want, that aren't consistent with our value sets, we've done that with Chairman Kim. I know the President has spoken about that with Xi as well. But you have to remember, those human rights challenges existed long before this administration came in, when our policies with respect to those countries were very different. That is, previous efforts to improve on those human rights conditions had failed. We are confident that the biggest threat to the United States, Chairman Kim's nuclear program, is the place we need to begin. And if we are successful, if we can get the outcome we hope to have, we think we create a greater probability that human rights conditions, not only in North Korea but around the world, may well improve.
Are there side protocols to the Singapore summit communique that we don't know about?
I just don't want to get into the details of the negotiations that took place before in Singapore and have continued since then. I think it is fair to say that there are a number of things, a number of principles that have been agreed to that I think both parties understand